Welcome to Epic World History. From exile to empire once more, Napoleon rose from the island of Elba, chasing destiny across Europe. His return ignited hope, fear, and war. Armies marched, thrones trembled, and the fate of nations converged on one field: Waterloo. This is the story of ambition, courage, and the final gamble of an emperor. In 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte, once the master of Europe and a symbol of unstoppable ambition, found himself confined to the small Mediterranean island of Elba. The Allied powers, certain his reign was over, believed that this rocky outpost of barely 60 square miles would be his final cage. But Napoleon was never a man to accept stillness. Even as he walked along Elba's rugged shores, listening to the crash of waves and feeling the weight of defeat, his eyes drifted toward the horizon. In that endless stretch of blue, he saw not exile, but opportunity, and already his thoughts turned restlessly back toward France. Napoleon's exile was born from a devastating collapse. The once unbreakable empire he forged through ambition and fire began to crumble after the disastrous invasion of Russia. The long march through snow and starvation broke his army, while across Europe, the Allied powers closed in from every side. By 1814, his enemies stood at the gates of Paris. Cornered and exhausted, Napoleon realized the dream of empire had slipped beyond his grasp. In a dimly lit chamber at Fontainebleau, surrounded by weary generals and cold-eyed envoys, he took up the pen and signed away his throne. As the ink dried, the age of Napoleon seemed to end, and France turned once more to the Bourbon crown. On the island of Elba, Napoleon retained the title of emperor. Yet his empire had shrunk to a mere fragment of land. Still, he ruled with the same precision and energy that once shaped continents. He reorganized the island's small government, repaired its crumbling roads, and established new trade routes. Each morning, he walked among olive groves and fishermen's villages, speaking with the locals as if still commanding a nation. Yet as he smiled politely to his subjects, his mind remained fixed on the mainland. News from France whispered of unrest, soldiers unpaid, loyalty uncertain, and the Bourbon monarchy faltering. Napoleon listened, silent but alert, sensing that history had not finished with him just yet. Across France, disillusionment spread like wildfire. King Louis XVIII, restored to the throne, failed to win the hearts of his people. His government raised taxes, dismissed loyal soldiers of the empire, and erased the tricolor, the proud symbol of the revolution in Napoleon's reign, from every public building. The Bourbon white flag fluttered once more over Paris, but it inspired obedience, not devotion. In taverns and marketplaces, veterans gathered in worn uniforms, their medals dull, but their memories bright. They spoke of glory, of unity, of the man who had led them to victory across Europe. Whispers grew into murmurs, and murmurs into conviction. France was restless, and the shadow of Napoleon began to stir once more. By February 1815, the waiting had ended. Napoleon knew the moment had come to defy fate once more. Across Europe, the Congress of Vienna argued over borders and thrones, and the Allied powers believed the Emperor of Elba was finished. Yet beneath the calm surface, France trembled. Soldiers longed for their leader. The people whispered of his name, and even the officers sent to guard him still spoke with respect. In his dimly lit quarters, surrounded by loyal companions, Napoleon leaned over a great map of France. Candlelight danced across the lines of rivers and roads that led to Paris, the heart of his destiny. With a steady hand, he traced his route north and made his decision. He would return. On the evening of February 26, 1815, Napoleon made his move. Under the pale light of a rising moon, he quietly boarded the small brig Inconstant, bound for France. Fewer than 1,000 loyal men stood with him, soldiers, sailors, and officers who believed the Emperor's destiny was not yet finished. As the anchor lifted and the sails filled with wind, the dark sea shimmered with silver light. British patrol ships prowled nearby, but fortune favored the daring. Wrapped in his gray coat, collar turned up against the cold, Napoleon stood at the bow, gazing toward the horizon. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the chance to reclaim his empire. Once more, he would gamble everything for France. On March 1, 1815, the waves of the Mediterranean carried Napoleon back to France. He landed quietly at Gulf Juan, a humble stretch of beach between the mountains and the sea. There were no cheering crowds, no fanfare, only the sound of boots sinking into wet sand and crates thudding onto shore. Around him stood less than 1,000 loyal men, weary but resolute. Before them stretched the long road to Paris, a road filled with uncertainty, risk, and hope. Yet Napoleon carried something stronger than an army, his legend. With speed, persuasion, and the memory of his past victories, he would march north, trusting that the hearts of France still beat for him. The campaign of 100 days had begun. From the quiet shores of Gulf Juan, Napoleon began his march toward destiny. Choosing the inland route through the Alps, he avoided royalist strongholds along the coast. The path was narrow and treacherous, winding through misty valleys and snow-capped peaks. Yet, at every small village he passed, the scene repeated itself: surprise, disbelief, and then awe. Farmers, tradesmen, and veterans emerged from their homes to see the man who had once ruled Europe. Mounted on a white horse, his gray coat brushing against the mountain wind, Napoleon spoke not with command, but with conviction. He promised not conquest, but renewal, the return of France's pride. Each step north transformed the march into a movement, and a movement into a legend reborn. Near the village of Laffrey, the moment of truth arrived. A royal regiment blocked the narrow road ahead, muskets drawn, their bayonets gleaming in the cold light of morning. Napoleon dismounted his horse and stepped forward alone. His officers begged him to stop, but he raised his hand for silence. Facing the soldiers who had once served him, he opened his coat and shouted, "If any man would kill his emperor, here I am." For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then, the muskets lowered, and a cheer rose like thunder across the field. The blue coats surged forward, embracing their emperor once more. Without a shot fired, Napoleon had reclaimed an army, not through force, but through faith. From that moment at Lafri, the road to Paris became a river of loyalty. What began as a handful of men turned into a moving army, a tide that no king could stop. As Napoleon marched north, garrison after garrison opened their gates, their flags lowered only to rise again beneath the tricolor. Villagers and veterans joined the column, cheering, weeping, shouting "Vive l'Empereur!" Fields once silent now echoed with drums and song. France itself seemed to awaken, its spirit rekindled by the return of the man who once carried its destiny. Each step brought him closer to Paris, and the city waited, breath held, heart trembling, for the emperor who had never truly fallen. News of Napoleon's unstoppable advance spread like wildfire through Paris. Panic gripped the royal court. Ministers argued, courtiers packed their trunks, and guards rushed through the corridors of the Tuileries. King Louis XVIII, pale and weary, realized his throne stood on crumbling ground. By nightfall, his carriage was waiting in the courtyard, wheels splashing mud as torches flickered in the rain. The monarch, who had returned with foreign aid, now fled his own capital, chased not by armies, but by the memory of a man who refused to vanish. The Bourbon Restoration, born of victory, ended in flight. On March 20th, 1815, Paris awakened to the echo of history. From the southern gates, Napoleon rode once more into the capital he had built into the heart of an empire. The streets overflowed with people, soldiers, merchants, mothers holding their children high above the crowd. Tricolor flags fluttered from windows and rooftops, their colors blazing in the spring sunlight. Cheers thundered through the boulevards. Vive l'Empereur! No shot had been fired, no city taken by force. France had opened its arms to its emperor. Yet amid the triumph, Napoleon's gaze was steady, almost distant. When the news of Napoleon's return reached Vienna, shock rippled through the marble halls of diplomacy. The Congress, once celebrating the end of war, now trembled with renewed fear. Delegates from the great powers gathered beneath glittering chandeliers, their voices rising in anger and disbelief. Britain's Wellington demanded immediate action, while Metternich of Austria urged unity against the Corsican usurper. Maps were unrolled, quills scratched across parchment, and alliances rekindled in haste. Within days, armies from Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia were set in motion, converging toward France like iron drawn to a magnet. Napoleon wasted no time. The moment he reclaimed his throne, he turned Paris into a forge of war. Orders flew from his desk at the Elysee. The army was to be rebuilt, regiment by regiment. Across France, veterans who had once marched with him under the burning sun of Austerlitz and Jena answered the call once more. Young recruits drilled beside gray-haired officers, learning the discipline of the Grande Armée. In the courtyards of the École Militaire, drums rolled, flags unfurled, and muskets gleamed beneath the spring light. To his men, Napoleon spoke not of conquest, but of honor and independence. Napoleon understood the danger closing in. Across Europe, the Allied armies were converging, a vast coalition determined to end his reign once and for all. Yet he would not wait for the storm to reach him. In the war rooms of Paris, maps of Belgium lay spread across the table, marked with red and blue lines. His plan was daring. Strike first, strike fast. If he could crush the British under Wellington and the Prussians under Blucher before Austria and Russia arrived, he might divide the coalition and secure France's survival. As his generals listened in tense silence, Napoleon's finger traced the route toward Brussels. On June 15, 1815, Napoleon's army crossed the frontier into Belgium at first light. The soldiers moved swiftly, their boots striking the damp earth, drums echoing in the cool morning air. For Napoleon, this was more than a march, it was a race against time. Every hour counted, for the Allies were already gathering to crush him before his momentum could grow. Two days before Waterloo, Napoleon struck the Prussian army at the village of Ligny. The fields became a sea of smoke and fire as cannon roared and musket volleys tore through the air. By nightfall, the Prussians retreated, but not in total defeat. They lived to fight another day, something Napoleon had not planned for. While Napoleon fought at Ligny, Marshal Ney engaged the British and Dutch-Belgian forces at Quatre-Bras. The battle raged among farmhouses and wheat fields, the summer air thick with gunpowder. Ney's assaults were fierce but lacked coordination, and Wellington's men held the crossroads. The delay kept Ney from linking with Napoleon in time to crush the Prussians completely. After Quatre-Bras, Wellington fell back to a defensive position near the village of Waterloo. He chose high ground, using ridges to shield his troops from artillery. His plan was simple but risky: hold until the Prussians arrived. It was a gamble of patience, facing an opponent who was famous for breaking armies with speed and precision. On the night of June 17, 1815, the heavens opened above Belgium. Torrents of rain drenched the countryside, pounding the fields into rivers of mud. Lightning flashed across the horizon, revealing the weary columns of Napoleon's army slogging north through darkness. Their cloaks were soaked, their boots heavy, and the great cannons of France sank deep into the mire. Campfires flickered feebly in the wind, struggling to stay alive as soldiers huddled for warmth. The storm raged until dawn, delaying Napoleon's attack, a single night that would change the course of history.